Welcome back, everyone. Yesterday, Touch and Go e-wallets announced its wallet size upgrade to 20,000 ringgit. Wow, more shopping, more retail. With that, let us welcome the next session of the day entitled Future of Retail. Moderating this session is Lingesh Lejaman, the former head of marketing and non-fuels retail, Shell Oman. He is an international retail leader with 20 years of senior management experience. He has led diverse teams with direct reports from Asia, Europe, and South America, managing retail networks exceeding 1,500 outlets. He's a global marketer who won the Shell Global VP Marketing Awards in 2020 and 2021. Bring the fuel and fire it up. Over to you, Lingesh.
Thank you very much, Hasrul. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. It's great to speak to you from Kuala Lumpur. Yes, I was based in Oman for about 3 years. I'm now back in Kuala Lumpur, and it's so exciting to speak about retail. I've been in retail for 20 years now, yeah. So it's a discipline that I'm so passionate about. Started off my career in supermarkets. We were selling. I was basically chopping beef, chicken, and mutton, and that's how my entire career in retail started. And today we're going to speak about technology. We're going to speak about how the traditional channels of retail has evolved and where it will be heading to into the future. And are we ready to embrace that change, right? And I've got two fantastic speakers with me today as well. So before I introduce them, or before I invite them to speak, ladies and gentlemen, let me just run through a quick brief. So we have Mr. Brian Fernandez, who is the sales director from Capillary Technologies. Brian has been in the loyalty marketing space for over 15 years now. All right, he's been part of the coalition loyalty programs, to being a user and finally a solutions provider. He has been exposed to various aspects of customer engagement, a strong advocate for the use of customer data in making sound business decisions. All right, he has been in roles as the head of loyalty in AirAsia, head of customer engagement in Malaysia Airlines, and business development roles in BonusLink and Real Rewards. He is currently with Capillary Technologies, a customer engagement solutions provider as director, sales for Malaysia and Philippines. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Brian Fernandez with us. And next, the second speaker or the second panelist will be Mr. Zain Suharwaldi. He's the managing director of Southeast Asia Commerce Practice, Accenture Interactive. So Zain is the managing director. All right. He was previously the head of Singapore Post e-commerce, a leading e-commerce enabler in Southeast Asia, helping brands and SMEs manage the e-commerce business end to end. So prior to Singapore Post, he was the senior vice president of digital transformation at Credor, managing director at Daras, part of Alibaba Group, and also vice president commercial at Lazada. All right, and we part of the founding team for Zalora. Wow, that's a huge credentials that our two gentlemen are bringing in today. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's head into the topic. What I'm going to speak today is about the future of retail. Yeah. So how is the evolution of retail and how is technology going to play a big part? So before that, let me just invite Mr. Brian and Mr. Zain to say hi to our audience before we move on to the questions. Brian and Zain, some quick words from y'all.
Hi, Lingesh. Thanks for the introduction, and pleased to share my thoughts on the questions to be posed later.
Thank you, Lingesh. Likewise, thank you for the introduction, and looking forward to answering some interesting questions related to the industry.
Fantastic, fantastic. Brian, let's just kick off with asking one question, which I spoke about earlier. So talking about retail, the question that I'd like to pose to Brian to kick off the discussion today is how a mix of data, delivery logistics, and connected technologies are powering and providing exceptional service. Let me repeat that question, yeah, because this could be a bit technical for the non-retail participants. So the question goes, how a mix of data, delivery logistics, and connected technologies are powering and providing exceptional service. Over to you, Brian.
Great. Thanks, Lingesh. I think to simplify it, let me break it down into three different components, right? So the first piece there you mentioned was data. Now it has always been about data, hasn't it? Data is the oil, as they say, right? Yeah. So brands which knew how to monetize, or a better word would be who knew how to harness the data of their customers, were always able to provide better service, right? That's the first piece. Now the second component there is delivery logistics. In the digital era today, we're surrounded by smart devices and plenty of delivery businesses. customers are becoming more and more demanding. So the need for real-time tracking of orders, for free package delivery, and easy access through a whole load of different gestures. So in order to resist competition and to satisfy the changing needs of the customers today, delivery logistics, there have been new trends and technology that is constantly enhancing the last mile delivery process. Things like faster, user-friendly delivery channels, big data, even smart outsourcing. All these have actually transformed the way products are dispatched and delivered today, right? And the third thing you mentioned was on connected technologies. Now, connected technologies, again, in the brick and mortar scheme, there are a lot of IoT devices, which is able to track a customer journey or a customer footpath when they're in their stores, right? There's also technology available today that can actually help identify customers while they're browsing in their stores, right? Things like self-checkout counters. There's also facial loyalty these days amongst all the connected tech available. So all these certainly enhance the customer experience.
Thank you, Brian. Now let me move to the next question. Yeah, the next question is, the question seems very simple. Yeah, it's about how do we drive how do we drive a successful customer journey and a customer e-commerce? So before I pose the question, I'd just like to reflect back on my career as a retailer. 20 years ago, what we would do as a young graduate going into the retail industry, we would be asked to walk around the aisles of the hypermarkets, right? And then we would observe customers. How do they push their trolley? Where do they go? What are the price points that they look forward to? So these were all data that we manually collected. I would be walking around with clipboards, writing down those data. So from hypermarket A, I would go to supermarket B, and then to CR Mart C and D, and so on. We come back, we compile the data. But today, this information is now available to us on a greater scale, right? And customers are also now buying it online. So the question that we like to pose to Zain is, today, how do we drive a successful customer journey in an omni-channel retail environment? Zain?
Thank you, Lingesh. So emulating what Brian had said, and Lingesh, what you've mentioned as well from your retail days of the offline conventional retails. I think the fundamentals of e-commerce are fundamentally the same as what offline retail is, right? So the framework is the same, except you have a much more real-time data. And data has been the buzzword for some time, but it's all about how our business is using that data. Are you being able to connect all your different sources of data into a single layer and then being able to use it to drive actionable insights? I'll give you the example of how we used to use data, and that's my benchmark of data for e-commerce and how we use it, and how I suggest it to now in my advisory roles, and how we execute growth strategies on e-commerce for brands. Data tells you exactly what are customers looking at, what are customers buying, both on a price point perspective, color, size. It gives you demographic data, it gives you geographical data, and all of this is what then marketeers can use to target specifically and more personalization, and exactly telling customers what they are looking for and then buying. So you all have seen all these Instagram ads or social media ads when you're talking about a certain product, and the next day you open your phone and you see that product right in your face. That's data being used to enhance conversion, to give you instant gratification. In the older world, for marketing, we used to use the term above the line and below the line. So, you create a brand awareness and then you tell them where can you go buy it. In today's world and in the omnichannel world, it's called middle of the line, right? Middle of the line means you create brand awareness and you give instant gratification to your customers to be able to buy something. And all of that requires the constant use of data and targeting the right products at the right price to the right people. The success of platforms like Lazada or Shopee or Zalora has been to be able to take this data and be able to use it real time, because customers are on your website looking for a certain product. And if you have it, you will convert. If you don't have it, they'll go to your competitors. And that insight is valuable in making actionable, quick decisions. And if you were to just adding on to that, the Amazon and Toys R Us example is the greatest example that comes to mind. When Amazon launched early on, they had Toys R Us on their platform, and they were telling Toys R Us after a couple of months, people are looking for ABC toys and you don't have them. So they're looking for it today and you bring them 3 months later, and there's a disconnect between when the demand comes and when the supply comes. Toys R Us didn't listen to them. They said, we're Toys R Us, we know this better. And fast forward 10, 15 years, there is no Toys R Us anymore. And Amazon's gone into that and using real-time data to give instant gratification to its customers. So, that's the power of data connected to traffic, connected to customer experience, connected to eventual sales and growth.
Thank you very much, Zain. So now with this muting and unmuting, there's a few seconds delay. Yeah? Okay, Zain, fantastic. I think, Zain, the data that you were talking about and the having ownership of the customer's journey and the entire data from an offline to online channel, yeah, it also has opened up in recent years the concept of B2B2C, right, where a business works or collaborates with another business, and then we go to the end customer. So this could be in the option of me being a retailer, a traditional retailer, and I have a third party who comes in and says, I give you the platform where you can sell your things online. So my products are also sold at my physical store, and I sell it online as well through a third party, another business, all right? And a customer purchases it through the other business, and the order is then made to me. Now, my question is, in a scenario similar to this, is there a risk of that customer relationship now sitting with the other party? See, in the earlier traditional ways, the relationship was between the customer and myself as the traditional retailer. But today in the modern world, there exists different businesses along that value chain or along that supply chain. So does it potentially pose a risk where I could lose these customers to a third party who then decides maybe one day I want to move away, I don't want to do business with Lingesh? Is there a possibility of me losing my customer as well? Zain, back to you again.
I don't agree with the brand losing that. See, eventually, and then Brian would probably have his insights on this as well. The world hasn't fundamentally changed, right? So platforms like Amazon, Lazada, and Shopee, and I think the big debate right now, Nike was one of the big controversial ones which came out and said, we are stopping selling on Amazon. We want to go D2C. And that's the reason to do that is data, right? And as a result of that, what's happened is, and it's a good change, where big platforms like Shopee and Lazada have now come out to partner up with some of the FMCG brands to say, we will share data with you because eventually it's your data. But Lingesh, eventually, I don't think in the conventional retail, it was the same as well, right? So the P&Gs, the L'Oreals, the Unilevers of the world always relied on a retail network to be the middleman to eventually get to the customer. You didn't have a L'Oreal branded store or a P&G branded store to go buy your shampoo. You went to a supermarket, and that supermarket was the B2B2C. Fast forward today, the push and the pull is for data. Lazada and Shopee and Grab and all these portals have been massive loss makers for longest amount of time, but they've gotten a big customer base. They've penetrated the market. They've created loyalty, and they've done it through great customer experience. And that's what their value is, because you list your products on a Lazada or a Shopee and you put in the right amount of dollars to market it, you will get a lot more traction than you would with your own efforts. However, that's where CRM and loyalty and all of those things come in, because brands have always looked at this in Southeast Asia, at least, and the conversation is changing with COVID. They've always looked at it in a micro scenario. They've said, okay, I have a Lazada store or I have a Shopee store, but it just brings me 1% of sales, and online is not something great, and I don't want to invest into a D2C channel. The point is, if you don't invest today in the right loyalty, right platform, right thing, creating a digital presence, you will lose out. Because I foresee 4 or 5 years down the road, what Nike has done is what Adidas is trying to push, is what L'Oreal is doing. Eventually, brands want to own their consumers. And it's basically, how do they use these platforms to get that digital visibility? And technically, in an omni-channel world, you need to be everywhere. So you can't leave Lazada or Shopee, but you also need to have a strong D2C, because the digital consumer can touch base with you anywhere and everywhere. And wherever they do touch base with you, you need to be present. So eventually, if you are providing top-notch superior service as a brand, because when you buy any product on Lazada and you get a bad experience because the product is not up to your expectations, you will blame Lazada, but most likely you will divert away from the brand. So eventually the product and the customer relationship is there. And if the customer likes your product, they will find ways to come back to you if you provide them with the right experience.
Great, Zain. Thanks for sharing those insights. Yeah, very valuable information. And perhaps this could give a lot of assurance to retailers or small-time operators who are now thinking about, shall I then go into this digital space? Shall I move into digital adoption? Personally, for me, if you don't do that, it's going to be a big challenge for your business. Yeah. And now when we talk about cost, I'm going to move to Brian. Yeah. So as a business expert, all right, as a solutions provider, a service provider who focuses on loyalty and CRM, there's definitely a cost associated to it. So Brian, my question to you is, yes, the big brands, they will be able to have the fundings, they would be able to have those deep pockets. But what about the smaller players, the supermarkets, right? Would cost be such a great impact that they say that, no, I don't want to go to digital adoption, I will remain offline? And will they be able to survive? What do you think, Brian?
I think they will need to find ways to adapt to the new norms, right? The new norms is enabling your customers to shop online, offline, anytime from any channel. They'll need to find ways. But you're right. The smaller supermarkets have a challenge, and that could be the upfront investments. But there are ways to look at it. There are, collaborations. There are aggregators. There are steps to take that they can to actually begin that journey to be towards that omnichannel, right? To be able to satisfy the needs of the customers, and more importantly, for them to survive today. Right. You're right. It used to be one where I have a supermarket and people, flock over. With Malaysia being in lockdown for so long, that's changing somewhat. So they really need to look at technology, whether it's via collaboration or on their own, to actually embark on this journey. To what Zain alluded to earlier, they need to. Otherwise they're going to be left behind. And it's scary to think what might happen in the next 3-4 years. I mean, you're talking about, customers these days, they're more savvy with a whole host of devices available for them to be able to sit back at home and shop. You want to be able to be part of that piece as well.
Thanks, Brian. Brian, I'm going to follow through that with another question. Yeah. So I remember in my earlier days in retail, I would spend a lot of time hunting for plots, hunting for plots where we would build the brick and mortar facility. All right. I used to do this in the Middle East, in Singapore and Malaysia, and that was part of the science of retail. It was location, location, location. So when you say retail, it's about that physical location, yeah. And you actually I started to develop this smell for retail locations. But today times are changing. There are so many retail players who do not have a physical presence. But now, post-pandemic, Brian, in your view, which would be an ideal scenario? To be 100% online, or would it still make a difference to have a physical presence while having an online store going? What do you think?
No, I think omnichannel is the way to go. I mean, if you look at what Amazon has done, Amazon started off online, but they eventually, had brick and mortar as well, right? So the omnichannel is the way to go. It's easier said than done, but yes, that would be the ideal scenario to be able to enable your customers access to your products and services, across any of the channels at any time that they want. But you're right. The thought was, I can set up online and I can compete. But if you look, the big boys these days are also looking at brick and mortar as a means to complement the online service. So that will be the way forward. And I think so retail will never really go away, the brick and mortar retail.
Thanks, Brian. I share that same sentiments as well. But now I would like to move to Zain. Yeah, Zain, we have seen a lot of technology coming into play, influencing the customer's ability or the customer's need to make a purchase. And we have seen augmented reality, right, playing its role as well. I've not personally shopped in an augmented reality retail environment, but I've seen videos where ladies can now, have an experience of testing their clothes, looking at the handbags. And how much do you think, Zain, this would impact the purchase, especially from the female consumers who are very much into face-to-face shopping and so on?
True, Lingesh. What I'm waiting for is when we can have, when we're able to smell perfume from the computer
Yes.
itself, but hopefully that will come in soon. But you're absolutely right, right? There are examples of these, and these, in the marketing world, in the loyalty world, these are all experiences. And I think the debate is still out on whether these experiences lead to better conversion, because see, at the end of the day, we're all retail, commercial-minded people, and we want revenue. And these are investments that, may or may not have an ROI, but they definitely get the buzz around, right? So there are a few cosmetic brands which have, brought in that, that the virtual mirror where you have a lipstick shade and then you can have it. But, as a result of that, if you go to some of the better beauty websites today, see, in online, it's all about content. It's all about your product display page and the content and the pictures you place in, because you can't touch and feel the product. So based on that virtual mirror example, now when you go and see a lipstick on on Sephora or Tom Ford lipsticks, you would be able to see that now their image, they have the first image of the product, the second image about the color, and on the third image, fourth image, they have people with different skin tones with the same lipstick, so that you can then match to your realistic skin tone and be able to see what it is. So they haven't done the investment in the technology, but they're taking ideas from that. I think eventually it's about how do you create convenience and remove that little doubt that customers have in their mind, where they say, okay, the product is nice, I like it, but I want to go to the store and try it on my skin. And I think COVID has been a big accelerator in that. The ability for you to not get out of your house has led to massive uplift in digital conversion. But now that people have seen that convenience and the content is becoming better and better, I think it's definitely there. So again, my take on this is, right, in digitalization, every decision you make cannot have a dollar-cent value attached to it. You need to invest in building the right experiences, and that will create your right digital branding, and that eventually will give you ROI. And there are very few leaders in retail who look a little far beyond the short term of instant gratification of profitability.
Thanks, Zain. Confession time. I'm one of those leaders that you have mentioned, yeah? Because holding on to a fixed set of annual targets, yeah, return on investments, I'm looking at my sales targets and so on. I look at basically from about 2 to 3 years, the investment that I put into my CRM, into my digital channels and so on. Do I make that ROI? And then how much further can it accelerate my growth? So if it's going to just contribute to my organic growth, then do I need this solution? That's the question that comes to my mind. And I'm going to move to Brian, yeah? So Brian, coming back to the question about digitalization, we spoke about loyalty, we spoke about CRM, all right? I want to go a bit more into CRM, because a lot of people in Malaysia could be wondering, what's the CRM all about? So for me, when I reflect back, I remember those olden days where we had this old uncle who will take all the breads and buns in his motorbike and he will drive all over. And we used to have this small notebook, we call it 555, Tiga Lima, right? So that Tiga Lima was basically a CRM model at its very basic element. So basically, we would pay monthly, but he would have the details of what purchases we were making and so on. So that small yellow, pink, blue book, yeah, was actually tying us down to that particular seller, because I had to go to him because he was giving me credit, right? So that model of CRM, moving from that 555 book, is now moving to such a complicated process, and we now start to understand more. So a basic question I want to ask you, Brian, is why is this CRM now so important for retail? Who, in my industry, in Malaysia, my previous employer, I remember we used to service approximately 1 million customers a day, right? 1 million customers a day. So just share with us what would be the value of having that data with us about our customers.
Sorry. Yeah, I think I mean, with any retail business, the key is how you leverage or harness the data of customers that you have, right? And in a typical retail environment, customers leave a lot of information behind, right? And it's how you capture that data and use it, right? Because you want to know your customers, you want to know what they bought, when they bought, how frequently they bought, and then we use that information to engage them, to keep them coming back. Fundamentally, that's what CRM is, right? Using customer data to engage them, to keep them coming back and spending more. But it's gotten, I wouldn't say complex, but it has evolved to now also understanding more about your customer, not just transactional, but behavioral, demographic, geographic, even things like customer satisfaction or customer feedback. Consuming all that data, understanding what is your customer's preferred communication channel, right? And making the right kind of offers to the customers via the preferred communication channel. So fundamentally, CRM is all about capturing data, analyzing what the customers do, engaging with them to keep them coming back and spending more. But using all these other, newer tools to enhance that or enrich that customer data and personalize the engagement with them.
Thanks, Brian. Brian, also following through with that explanation that you have given us, let's say there is a medium-sized retailer, who now says that, okay, I would like to engage the services of a service provider to build my CRM, to build my loyalty program. But he has this fear that I've built this customer base over a period of 30 years, for example, and now I'm sharing it with the service provider who suddenly has access. What if I lose this data, or what if they are going to do something with this and eventually I lose that relationship? Is there a potential risk, or how do you retailers avoid this?
No, I think that's a good question, and that's a valid question. I've encountered those kind of scenarios before. But the key thing is finding a solution provider with a track record, who's got all the data, protection, adherences, the policies that they adhere to, and knowing the brands that they work with. That will give the small retailers some level of comfort in terms of the practices of solutions provider of such. But yeah, the key is, technology or solutions providers these days. This is the basic thing that they would look at to ensure that the client and the client's customers' data is protected, that even the solution providers are not able to have any kind of access to that data. So all these measures will give some level of comfort to the retailer that, yep, I can be assured that my data will not be compromised in any way.
All right, thanks, Brian. That was good, yeah, because with so many service providers popping up, so many online agencies, sometimes we don't even know who are the credible ones or who are even the valid, legitimate ones, yeah? So having a review of the track record, all right, past performance, clients, that would help us to determine if these are really the solid guys we want to work with. Thanks, Brian. Zain, moving back to you, we were speaking a lot of the online shopping experience, yeah? Now let's go back into the brick and mortar, which is here to stay, all right? So we believe the omnichannel will continue to exist. There will be a growth in the brick and mortar retail outlets, as well as we see growth in online. But how can the traditional physical stores continue to evolve? What would be your insights, or what do you foresee the evolution in the physical retail stores coming soon?
I think Lingesh, the evolution has already started, right? You can look at examples, and a couple of years ago we could say look at examples in the West or in China, but I know that there's a lot of big groups in Southeast Asia today which are going into the true omni-channel experience, and that means that they are using part of their retail landscape to become semi-fulfillment centers for them as well. right? And there were good examples of this from Walmart and a few others in the US where they started offering curbside delivery and stuff. So, with e-commerce, right? If you look at that number across Southeast Asia, as per Google Temasek, last year the industry was standing at about $60 billion, and by 2025, they said in 5 years this number is going to be $170 billion. So that means that there's going to be $110 billion growth in GMV in 5 years, which means you need eventually massive, massive investment in infrastructure to fulfill operationally. Retailers are sitting on gold right now, which is their physical brick and mortar presence. So, if you look at Lazada or any other, look at Amazon, right? Why did Amazon buy Whole Foods? They have realized that along with having a digital presence, you also need physical muscle to be able to pick, pack, ship these orders. And as the demand is increasing into, instant gratification, instant delivery, you need to be nearest to the customer. So your best case example is Starbucks. Starbucks has one branch every 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers in some of the cities. McDonald's is another one. And their ability to deliver express is by having the closest proximity to their customers. Now, retailers have that advantage. In my previous role in Malaysia, and that's where me and Brian connected for the first time. I was working with the private equity where we were digitalizing Mr. DIY. Mr. DIY has 650 plus stores in Malaysia. That is amazing because you are everywhere in Malaysia and your ability to serve customers is great. But the complexity then comes in and the investment that comes in is how are you being able to get a snapshot of inventory sitting in those 600 locations to be available on your online site so that the customer buying from you can be fed through the nearest location from them. And that's where you are able to create efficiencies. Data comes into play over here as well, because you eventually use the data to see that, what are the top 50, 80 products that people in Shalom are buying versus in downtown Kuala Lumpur versus in Langkawi versus, anywhere. And then that's where you try to build both your offline assortment in a store, but also online and keeping it as a fulfillment. So there is structural changes. There is obviously massive investment in technology to get all of this enabled. And also, I think the biggest change that retailers will need to adopt is changing or upskilling their workforce. Because in a normal retail store, jobs are very well defined. You need to pick up boxes and put it on the shelf. You need to count the shelves and you need to take a checkout. But in this environment of omnichannel, you need to add 1-2 more tasks to that person. And it's all about upskilling them and explaining to them how to do it. So I feel retailers have the best possibility to take advantage of it. The question is, again, back to making that will to look futuristically and to make that decision based on 5 years from now, not instant gratification. And I think that's some of the things that I've been advocating for a long time. I know Brian in his role has been advocating that as well. And I want to add one more thing over here is go and Google or go to YouTube and look at some of Jeff Bezos's interviews 10 years back. This is when he started AWS, right? And everybody was like, what is Amazon Web Services? And the other statement he made was, every new business we start, for the first 5-6 years, we know we will make loss, but eventually there's a tangible business model at heart and the unit economics speak positively. And Amazon Web Services, which is now a multi-billion-dollar business, made losses for the first 3-4 years because they were investing in infrastructure, they were investing in the future. And it might seem like the same banter from me and for any other digital advocate, but it is a reality, right? Things don't happen overnight. You can't, today, the classic thing in COVID is people come to us and say, I need to do digitalization. I need a website. I need it tomorrow. It doesn't happen that way.
Thank you, Zain. Fantastic. 2 points I want to pick up. The first one, I'm going to come back to you later. It was about the need for retailers to upskill and reskill the workforce. That is an imminent need for that to happen now. Unfortunately, based on my personal observation, I'm not seeing it happening as much as it should, because we are still sticking to that. I have a traditional merchandiser, I have a shop supervisor, they remain. So the offline capabilities are remaining offline, and now we perhaps are bringing in new to be online. But how do we merge these skills together? where the current workforce is now being enabled or empowered to take on the digital capabilities. So that is one area which I think even MDEC is also strongly advocating. All right. The other one we wanted to speak about that Zain spoke about is having that digitalization process to happen now. It's a long process, yeah. It is not a journey that happens in an instant. Because I remember in Oman when the pandemic hit, we were totally offline and we wanted to move online, and it took a matter of weeks, and it was not there. It was not that once the website was ready, customers are ordering, it's done. I take a seat back. That's where after that is when the signs come into place, where we observe the customer patterns, what products are moving, where you start thinking about promotions, campaigns, and the marketing that you do for your online channels are quite different from what you do for your offline channels as well. All right, Brian, coming to you as well, in the space of capability development in retail, and how does retail open up opportunities for employment? Since we are now facing an issue with people losing jobs, does retail now come in as a savior? Does retail remain stagnant? What are the opportunities in terms of employment in retail?
That's a very good question, Lingesh, and a very tough one, I might add. But interesting. I think there are many aspects to this. I mean, if you look at retail is huge. You talk about outlets. You talk about warehousing. So it's quite wide. And when you talk about warehousing, again, which used to be very heavily dependent on people, a lot of it is moving now with more technological advances coming in. I mean, Zain, mentioned Mr. DIY. Now they have started implementing robotics in their warehousing. Now, the need for people is still there, but eventually it will get to the point where you've got technology taking over some of the very laborious tasks that people typically undertake. But that's not all doom and gloom. I think there's still a lot of upsides to this, because this will enable employees to be more, the upskilling will help, right? Because now instead of doing the laborious tasks, staff become more customer facing, would be able to engage customers in a very personalized way using data that's being fed to them. So imagine this: you walk into a retail outlet, and a staff walks up to you and say, sir, are you a member of our loyalty program? And if you said yes and give them your number, the interaction with you is far more personalized, because they'd have information about, I'm talking to Mr. Lingesh, I know what he bought the last time, I know what his preferences are. So upskilling workforce has its benefits. So yeah, there are many ways to be able to deploy these, the workforce to enhance the customer's experience when they're engaging with retailers.
Thank you, Brian. So as you were speaking, Brian, I was also looking at some of the questions coming from the audience, which was channeled through my mobile phone. So I'm going to stick to you, Brian, to take this question from the participants. Just give me a moment, yeah. It's a long one, and let's try to understand this together. So, Brian, the first question to you would be from our audience of participants: with a lot of options opening up for customers online, which includes competing brands and aggregators, does loyalty still consider a key aspect of retailing?
I'm all for loyalty. I'm a customer loyalty proponent. So I strongly believe loyalty is a differentiator, especially if it's used in the right way. Again, going back to data, a lot of retailers, online, offline, have a lot of data of customers. They reward customers, whether it's through points, discounts, rebates, whatsoever. But it's in using that data to engage with the customer. That's what actually builds loyalty of the customer, right? If you receive messages which you can relate to, which resonate with you, because the brand knows you and knows what you like and what you've bought, the tendency is to you to shop with the brand because of the whole experience with the brand. The brand knows you, you're familiar with, where things are stocked, or where to navigate to get the stuff that you want. So loyalty helps with all that. Loyalty is a part of customer experience. And again, the key is in the engagement between the brand and the customer.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Brian. Zain, we'll take another question from the participants as well. This is a bit lengthy as well. Let me read out the question to you. This is how the question is, yeah? What are some of the platform players that loses revenue despite having a voluminous customer base and a variety of product offerings, besides being in existence for a good number of years? Let me just summarize that, yeah? I think the question asks us, why are some of the players losing revenue despite going digital and despite having a lengthy track record, loyal customer base, and so on? But the moment they went digital, they seem to be losing that traction or losing out to competitors. Why do you think this is happening?
Is the question about losing out traction, or is the question about having the right base and market penetration, but still losing out money? So meaning not being a profitable setup.
Losing revenue, losing money.
Losing money, right?
Yes.
Lingish, again, data about platforms is not really there, but I can, use certain reference points, right? The Lazada model and the Shopee model has very clear positive unit economics, right? And I've done this study for the likes of, when I mentioned Mr. DIY, and I mentioned a lot of other brands that I've now worked with in terms of advising them from, setting up their platforms on D2C to building their commercial strategy, the digital marketing performance and everything. On a unit economics level, they are positive. So how do I define unit economics, right? There is a cost to fulfill an order that you receive online. And are you positive in that? And then there's variable costs and there's fixed costs associated with that. So simplifying it, you are a clothing business and you have your average order value is $100, right? Your average margin is $40. So meaning your margin is 40%. So as long as you can take this order, pick it, pack it, ship it, and the traffic that you brought in the marketing dollars you spend to do it, if all of that can be fit in within that $40 that you make, you are good. Meaning you are unit economic positive. Now, the problem is if you are spending more to fulfill versus the $40. So let's say your cost of fulfillment to pick, pack, ship out an order is $50. How do you change that? Do you say that e-commerce is not for me? I don't think that's the right approach. There are fundamental ways to improve that, and on top of mind is you need to increase your basket size from $100 to $150. Because $150 basket size would mean that your shipping cost does not fundamentally change. Your warehousing, your picking, packing cost does not fundamentally change. Your digital marketing spend does not fundamentally change. All it matters is how do you play with your commercial strategy, your shipping strategy, your voucher strategy to get people to now spend $150. And at $150 gives you $60 now of disposable margin, and your cost is still $50 and you're positive $10. But there is a route to this. There is a way. You don't automatically come out and say, today my order value is 80. I need them to spend 150. So here you go, spend 150. It doesn't work that way. There's product assortment, looking at your pricing. This was one of the problems we had with, as an example with DIY, where, their average item value is 4 or 5 ringgits. Yep. And if I need to build a 60, 70 ringgit basket, that means I have 15, 20 items in an order, and that becomes a logistical nightmare for e-commerce. But we came around that through strategies. I'm not going to go into the deeper level of strategies that you do, but I think that's where people like me and Brian are there, and you can tap our brain, and I'm happy to talk about those things in detail.
Thank you so much, Zain and Brian. That has been really very insightful, yeah. And even for someone like me who has been in the industry for so many years, it has been such a learning experience, especially from what I'm hearing from both of you in the digital front, from loyalty and CRM. The transition of physical stores to the online stores and how relevant will omnichannels be. Now, I'm going to take, we shall be summarizing the session. I will go on to my last 2 questions. I'll go to the first one with Brian. So Brian, the question that we would like to pose to you as to wrap up the session today would be, in the next decade, right? In the next decade, what are the forces retailers must contend with in order to succeed? Or what would be the greatest challenges awaiting retailers in the next 10 years to come?
That's a good question again. I think the big challenge here for retailers really will be to figure out the needs and wants of the younger customers, right? Knowing their preferences, like their preferred purchase channel. Is it through online? Is it through social? Is it other channels? Knowing their preferred communication channel. Is it traditional SMS, emails? Is it social channels? Is it push notification? Even things like their preferred payment option. Do I pay by credit card? Do I do bank transfer? All of those. It really is about knowing their younger customers' preferences, right? And ensuring that they're able to meet the demands of these younger customers. So technology will continue to advance. Newer, vibrant brands will arrive on the scene as well as competitors.
Yep.
So these are just some of the forces that I feel retailers will have to contend with. Hence the need to be able to adapt, embrace, and really engage.
Thank you, Diane. That's a fantastic one. Yeah, understanding the needs of the young customers. So these young customers could be, the teenagers or the young adults below 25. So they don't carry cash nowadays. I just noticed this, that they don't seem to carry cash. They are not eligible to have a credit card of their own. So how do they pay? So let's say they make e-payment. But if that retail outlet does not have facilities to accept mobile payment, then how do you capture these customers? Yeah. So these are things that retailers need to think of today, because this customer base is going to get bigger, and they're going to get more powerful in terms of their spend. All right. So thanks, Brian, for that. Next, we're going to move to Zain. So Zain, the question I'd like to ask you is, we have spoken a lot about data and technology, but what about social commerce? So the question is, how important do you think is social commerce, or using social media such as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and so on, to drive the retail business?
So social commerce is an interesting aspect, right? It's the new buzzword of the last 6 months or 7 months. There is the reality of it, and there is the solution at offer, right? The reality is social media and social commerce is a force to reckon with. You have people like TikTok and the others who are making aggressive stances towards e-commerce, and there is a reason, right? So if you look at Southeast Asian data, the average Southeast Asian consumer spends about 2.5 to 3 hours a day on social media. If you look at majority of the platforms, D2C and Lazada, Shopee, and all of these people, majority of the traffic that brands are driving for e-commerce is through these social media channels. Now, the social media channels are giving you instant gratification, live videos, gamifications. So it is definitely something for brands to be in. Then the second part is about experience, right? Social commerce is not where it needs to be in Southeast Asia right now. You have Facebook shops and all of those things, but you don't have the checkout ability. There is conversational commerce and a few integrations which are available. But I do feel there is value in being a first mover over here, to have that integration and to have that social commerce presence, and evolve as the vertical evolves. Because social commerce and social media is there to stay. And if the earlier you adapt it, the better. And it all overall archingly goes to what we started talking about, was that in today's omnichannel environment, you need to be everywhere as a brand, because everywhere, and you need to certain segment your market audiences everywhere. And then, you need to eventually find that slice of market and platform that works best for your audiences on conversion, and eventually going to that revenue growth model. So it's definitely a buzzword. We've done some implementations for some clients on social media, and we're using different strategies. Some of them are not using it for their entire assortment, but only for new product launches or seasonal product launches, where they want to, engage with a certain audience and get instant gratification and conversions. But it's a topic that should be on the minds of every retailer. And if they're not thinking about it, then they should.
Thank you, Zain. In Malaysia, currently, we do see a lot of this social commerce. However, it is not an end-to-end process yet. So as Zain mentioned just now, I see the product being advertised on social media. I see it on Instagram. But can I follow through in that same channel right up to checkout and up to delivery? That's not happening, So social commerce is not just about posting those adverts and those images. It's an entire end-to-end value chain, where the transaction right up to the point of purchase and you receive happens in one channel. Now, Zain, also coming back to taking up another question from the audience as well, with regards to data analytics, since we have been speaking quite a lot about it. There seems to be a lot of work happening around the legislation, even in Malaysia and Southeast Asia as well. A lot more laws and policies are being put forward to protect the consumer data. Do you think that these laws and these legislations coming up could be a barricade or could be a barrier in terms of us using consumer data analytics to drive the retail business?
I think Brian would probably be able to add a little bit more light on this, but my thing is, all of us are those people whose data is being taken, right? So I, for one, am a big advocate of the fact that our data needs to be protected, because I don't know, but I freak out when I wake up in the morning and something that I was talking about at night, I see it on my phone. It's not an interesting experience.
Brian, your thoughts on this?
No, I mean, I think they are adequate in terms of the kind of data protection policies that are in place. But I think it's how brands use this data responsibly. And for me as a consumer, if I can resonate to some of the messages that I get, then I'm comfortable. I'm okay with that. And I think that's key, and that's why I mean there has to be some amount of I won't say checking, but some amount of cleverness in how brands actually use this data, so as not to be seen as intrusive, but more about knowing you, and hence I'm sending you this.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brian. I think we're coming towards the end of the session. It's at 11:54 now. Just give me a quick moment. I check if we are taking any more questions from the participants. Give me a moment. Also a break to you all gentlemen for such an insightful sharing. Well, I think we have come to the end of the session. Let me just quickly summarize in just a few words. Yeah. So what we are looking at now, and we are in agreement, is that the omni-channel is here to stay. All right. That will be the way forward. Retailers have to get on board the digital journey. All right. We also will continue to see the brick and mortar, the traditional models of physical stores continue to exist. All right. There's a huge need for us to now go onto the loyalty platforms, build your CRM, and enhance that customer experience. Social commerce, despite being very new, will continue to be a need, and hence, see, the beauty of social commerce is it opens up doors for micro entrepreneurs as well. Micro retailers can now use social commerce as a platform to sell their products, right? So let's wish a great future for the retail industry, something that all of us are so passionate about. And thank you very much, Zain and Brian. And with that, I hand over back to Hasrul. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Lingesh.
Thank you, Lingesh, and our panel members for that riveting conversation on the retail in the age of technology through omni-channels. Thank you so much, and gentlemen, for your insights. We'll now be moving forward to our next session of the day. It will begin very shortly, so click join session and also complete the survey for each session for us to continuously serve you better. See you in a bit.